What we're doing as of the end of next month is substantially increasing the support that we're providing for those who are taking on childcare, who are in work and receiving universal credit. So that's a 47% increase in the amount that people can claim. So a huge increase there. The second thing we're doing is one of the things that's prevented people taking on childcare in the past has been the fact that they're having to find the money up front. So we're removing that problem by helping them with those childcare costs. So this is a very major step. And of course, what this will lead to, Kay, in time, is a greater participation in the labour force. And so what we want is more people in work so that we can ease those tight labour markets, those businesses that are really struggling to find the right people, and childcare is absolutely key to that.
Why haven't you done it before now?
Well, we've done a lot of things that we've been rolling out in the past, including free childcare. And of course, we have had support for childcare through universal credit. But what the last budget did in the spring was to put a firm emphasis on labour market interventions that will boost the size of the workforce. And this is one of the ones that the Office for Budget Responsibility, incidentally, says will have the most significant impact. So this will be a major step.
OK. What are you going to do about people who are resorting to shoplifting things like baby food because they literally can't afford to feed their kids otherwise?
We totally recognise that this is a very difficult time, particularly with high inflation and high core inflation, food inflation, and we're seeing that in other countries. Sweden, Portugal, Germany, for example, have very similar levels of inflation. So what we're doing, to answer your question, is as much support as we can provide to those who need it the most. So through my department, cost of living payments have been going out last year, they're going out this year. That's £900 for 8 million people in low-income households, £150 for those that are disabled, £300 with the winter fuel payment for pensioners. We put up the national living wage by 9.7%. The energy price guarantee, where we've had a windfall tax on the energy producers to halve fuel bills. So those are really important things that we can do in the face of pressures that a lot of countries are now sadly facing.
And yet still people feel that they have to shoplift baby formula. Should they be prosecuted if they shoplift baby formula, people?
Well, it's not for me to...
What do you think?
Well, it's not for me. Shoplifting is wrong and all theft is wrong, and I would never justify that. Of course, it's down to the individual store that may find itself in that situation to make those judgments, not for me and for the police. But what I'm saying is that this government is absolutely on the side, as I've just identified, of those who are struggling the most, to give them as much support as we can. And incidentally, the support with childcare, of course, will not just be for those newly going into the workforce. It'll be additional support for those who are already receiving that offer.
What do you make of what the ASDA chairman has been saying? He says governments of any complexion owe us a debt of gratitude, and this recent speculation over the last couple of days about fixing prices is frankly rather backward-looking.
OK, well, so I think if you look at the idea of fixing prices or oligopolies and monopolies, etc., that's a matter for the Competition and Markets Authority, and indeed they're investigating at the moment unit pricing.
He says it's
what the government, what the government is really about, and this is why we've been having conversations with food producers, with farmers, with the supermarkets themselves, is just making sure that the market is working as efficiently and effectively as it can do to keep prices as low as possible. But there's no getting away from the fact that we do have high inflation. Now, we've come off the back We've come off the back of COVID. We had to spend £400 billion supporting the economy then. We've got the war in between Russia and Ukraine that spiked energy.
Well, we do. I mean, I'm asking you what you think about Stuart Rose saying it backward-looking. Absolutely, and we touch on it every day, and I allowed you to speak without interruption about universal credit. Backward-looking is what he says.
Well, if that's referring to looking at pricing, and so, the notion of price capping. Well, we're not, I think, heading towards the 1970s and lots of price controls left, right and centre. But I do think when we have these particular pressures, it's responsible of government to have a dialogue with the supermarkets and food producers and so on to see what can collectively be done to try and keep those price rises as low as possible. And I don't think that's an unreasonable... I'm sorry?
Are they doing enough, supermarkets?
Well, as I say, the Competition Markets Authority is looking into this whole issue of unit pricing and will come to its own conclusions, so it's not for me to prejudge that. But as I say, we're on the side of consumers, particularly the most vulnerable, with the payments that I've described earlier. And we're also making sure we're involved in those conversations to try and do whatever we can to keep prices down. Now, look, all the forecasts are that inflation should be about half the level at the end of this year as it has been at the beginning of this year. And that's one of the key missions that the Prime Minister set. And he's absolutely right, and we're right as a government to do that, because that will ultimately take the pressure off.
Let's wait and see. Interest rates, let me ask you about this one, because we had Andrea Leibson sat where you are last week. And as you know, she's involved with the Finance Committee, and obviously Downing Street are very interested in what they have to say. They're very upset that interest rates, for some people, pensioners potentially, who tend to vote Labour, vote Conservative, forgive me.
Let's see, we don't take anything for granted.
There we are. Tend to vote Conservative. They may have some savings, and the interest rates are not being passed on to people who've got perhaps some money in their savings account, to the extent of £23 billion a year. What should the government do to sort the banks out?
So the Treasury Select Committee has been looking at it. I used to chair that committee for a period of 3 years, and I know that they're carrying out a very thorough investigation of it. And
that's a lot of noughts that they're keeping.
Yeah, looking at their conclusions. I think, broadly speaking, the banking and financial services sector is a relatively efficient and highly competitive marketplace. So you would expect, as one particular bank starts to change its rates, others to follow. But it is sticky. And, of course, government, the business department and Treasury and others are often involved in discussions with banks about exactly those kind of things.
That feels like a bit of a swerve to me, Mr Stride.
Well, it is a free market, and people, of course, my advice generally would be, if you feel you're getting a very poor rate with one particular institution, is shop around and find one that will pay a better rate, and there are those out there. Now, some of the stickiness
comes... Not the big banks, so...
Well, some of the stickiness comes because there's often inertia as between the customer and the bank itself. In other words, do I want to... But it's relatively easy to change and switch accounts, and it's worth shopping around. And so my advice to anybody, of whatever age, actually, is if there are better deals out there with similar institutions on a similar basis, then move your account. Yeah.
Let me ask you about the COVID inquiry before I let you go. Baroness Hallett, as you know, has got involved. She said, if the Cabinet maintains its position that it does not hold specified materials, it must provide in substitute a witness statement from a senior civil servant verified by a statement of truth. In other words, she doesn't believe that these documents are not available to hand over to her, both WhatsApp messages and also the former Prime Minister's diaries. Should they be handed over?
So what the government is doing here is we've started this inquiry because we think it's very important that we get to the bottom of some really important questions that many, many millions of people want to know the answers to around the COVID pandemic and our response to it. We've provided around 55,000 documents, 8 witness statements, some corporate witness statements as well, to the inquiry, and we absolutely intend to continue to be absolutely transparent and candid.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to
she wants more, can she have them?
Yeah, well, she's extended, I think, Baroness Hallett has extended the deadline until tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It's not really for me to prejudge exactly where that is going to land, other than to say that I'm absolutely certain and confident that the Cabinet Office will be engaged in this in exactly the right kind of way and in the kind of spirit that I've just outlined, of making sure that we are absolutely robustly transparent where it is appropriate to be so, and I think that's an important qualification, so that that inquiry has all the information that it is right for it to have.